Go. All right, here we go again. It's so close to 8 o'clock you can almost smell it, my friends. How are you? Tis. Well, I'll wait till that exact pop of the top of the hour to where I'll announce exactly what time it is and what day it is, in case you missed it, because it's easy to do. But not everyone has a perpetual calendar keeping you up to date. So it is Sunday, January the 11th, 8 a.m. We're having coffee. I'm Jim, and I'm glad that you decided to come along and just have a Sunday morning conversation about things. Because, yeah, I don't know. It's been an interesting weekend in many ways on the backstage here, because I'm always like maybe thinking too much about a lot of this stuff. I know I am, actually. I'm kind of notorious for it. And now you have more to think about and play with and mess with and, I don't know, maximize the effort, if you will. So anyway, what all has happened? And a very good morning to you, Damien. Glad that you showed up. What happens when I do this? Okay. Oh no, I did that. I did that. I clicked that and it did things. Okay, cool. Anyway, so yeah, it's like, it was so funny, man. Like yesterday, I got myself caught up in thinking about two sides of the equation. You know, the human side and the machine side and the tool side and all that. And it made for a lot of interesting things packed away into the old gray matter. And how productive was it? I don't think hardly any at all, because there was just so much noise that I surrounded myself with. But it's interesting, again, it's the next morning, kind of absorbing all of that, you know, and taking a quick look at the headlines and see what, you know, we are supposed to see. I realized I didn't want to see it, so I turned it all off. And again, another reason why I'm proactively staying away from the Facebook platform as much as possible. Just because, nah, I'm just not a fan. But I thought I'd just share some of the stuff that I came across. Okay, well, let's start with how the morning started, right? Again, as having served in the role of producer for many years, for many people and things, and to define producer in this instance is as far as like curating talking points, content, music, stuff, elements, right? It was funny because in yesterday's show, like I say, if in the modern era, I would have had to like can myself, because with what was being done yesterday, which is just fun and throwing out some love to my buddy Gar, and kind of recapping or revisiting some old stuff I found in the YouTube stuffs. By the afternoon, I got the notification from YouTube that, boy howdy, I got slapped a little bit. And because I actually, and it happened originally too, so this is not like a new thing that came about. But yeah, so the music that I used in like the animations and everything for Gar, which was done just solely for fun, because again, that's just, you know, that's what Gar does. With Horrible Horror, it's meant for fun, and that's it. You know, he's not looking to monetize anything, never has. But I used the tunes that I used there. Again, of course, they all got tinged and pegged and all that, but it wasn't a big deal. I wouldn't say it is, because again, I'm not monetized on YouTube at this point, so again, not a big deal. But it is funny when it comes from, when thinking about it from a producer's standpoint. Back in the days of producing like for radio and everything, and television too, but definitely radio, it was so much easier, because once, you know, the station was paid up on its ASCAP, CSAC, and BMI fees, you pretty much had easy reign on using anything you wanted for like bumps and clips and things like that. It was like, sure, you paid to play to make sure you stayed legal, legit, and the artists and such got compensated properly inside of that world. But but also things were just going out into the ether after one shot. You know, there might be some replays or something along the way, but not a whole lot. But again, it's just kind of funny thinking about those things, because now, I guess in 2022, 2023, I started playing around with the idea of like doing an online radio station thing. And I kind of tested the waters a little. It really had no purpose. It would be vanity more than anything. But I wanted to do it right. You know, as far as like one part, because again, I try to like follow the rules as best I can. publicly. Well, that sounded terrible. But I try to always follow the rules and the guidelines because, again, I don't want the headache or the hassle for a viewer or for myself if you're like get on a hot streak and a roll, and then next thing you know, 3, 6, 9 months later, things come back and bite you in the posterior because someone's claiming copyright on stuff. And I'd experienced this early on in the internet days, because being aware of the way things work, I had royalty-free libraries, right, that I had purchased for production music and such, and I was still getting pinged. And I'm like, whoa, 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 no, 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 no. That's not how this works. I've got the license and everything. And it was always problematic. And that's where, when it comes to the world of like AI generated music, now I prefer it for like music tracks and beds and things like that, because, you know, theoretically, and I say theoretically because even though it's in place and it's being used, theoretically, when you subscribe to these things, you've got your full copyright permissions personally, right? You own what you create by way of prompts. But that doesn't stop someone from putting a ping on your ass anyway for the copyright, because they can say they own it instead of you. And then you've got to like prove your innocence. It's just crazy. Damien, to answer your question, yes, as a matter of fact, I did finally get an app on my Roku that can take Twitch TV to the big screen, and I was very, very happy about that. And then a little disappointed to realize that Gar was off the air and it was a rebroadcast from way back in 2016, but it was great because it was Brides of Dracula, and what a great, great, great flick. And plus, anything with Peter Cushing, I will watch, because I just love Peter Cushing. I just think he's awesome. Again, my first introduction to him was, of course, with Star Wars and Grand Moff Tarkin. But then when you go back and you watch any of the Hammer horror films and him as Van Helsing and all that, just great stuff. And Brides of Dracula was funny because, again, that was a Christopher Lee free movie. And that's not, I don't know, just Christopher Lee is just, he's one of those too, like from the Hammer days, that whole Hammer ensemble and cast, they were just great, man. It's like the theater players of the modern age at that time. And the Hammer films have such a great aesthetic to them. You know, it's like when you turn on a flick, you will know immediately when you're watching a Hammer film. And again, that's so lost now. You know, I remember, I guess it was probably around 89, 90, somewhere off in there, when I had my first access to a BBC sound effects library, and they were all on vinyl. And so it is so funny looking back now, because you would have to, and you'd have like, good God, I don't know, 30, 35, 60 sound effects on the record on one side, and then flip it on the, and it was such a pain. But at the same time, it was well organized, but it still felt clunky, because you would have to go from the vinyl to catch it on cart. So you cue everything up to make sure it's nice and tight whenever you hit the button. So when you hit the button, it was right there. Gosh, in those days, the orchestration of stuff as far as being able to conduct the symphony, that was fun. But anyway, yeah, just thinking about those things. And that's what this morning has been a whole lot before. Yeah, it was before my time too, but you know, by then, yeah, it's like I was late to the party on a lot of that stuff, but at the same time, I'd been familiar with it sort of, because I'd say I was quite fortunate. Again, I don't know what television looked like up here in this region back then, but from what I can just gather and just trying to like do some history research on the Ozarks region and television back, like say in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, when I was a kid. It was interesting, because I know in Little Rock, we didn't see, we always had the four. We had ABC, NBC, CBS, and PBS. And that was great. And then when the first independent station went on the air on the UHF side of the dial, which was channel 16 KLRT, it was kind of funny, because to bring this magical new channel into your home, you would have to get the UHF loop antenna for your television. And it was funny because it was such a magical thing, because we didn't have cable television. I guess it was available, but my folks never saw a need in it. And I didn't disagree really. until the USA Network came along. But that's a different story for a different time. But once the UHF Channel 16 came on, and everybody in my elementary school was talking about it because there was so much wild and wacky cool stuff happening on this wild and wacky UHF station. I think that's why I've got a really big affinity for like Weird Al's movie UHF. But, and I was pestering my dad so much. He finally succumbed to stopping by, I think, a Radio Shack to get that 35-cent UHF antenna, and a whole new world opened up, and it was just amazing. I look back on it and I was like, wow. But ironically enough, that magic that was pretty influential when I was a kid did not in any shape, form, or fashion encourage me to want to get into a career in television. I was still leaning with radio. Radio was still a very prominent part of what just really like resonated. I loved listening to the radio. I enjoyed the weekend shows like your American Top 40 with Casey Kasem and Dr. Demento, and those were just awesome. It's like, and that's one of the things, like when it comes to like horrible horror, and I don't pigeonhole him as a Dr. Demento, but he is kind of a Dr. Demento, more so than just a horror host, because he will find things. And watching the show last night, he will just find the things that he curates, I should say. He curates things that just fit flow, and otherwise I wouldn't know a clue about, And I just appreciate that so much. Wow, see, in Indiana and being able to pick up Chicago or Cincinnati, see, that's fascinating to me, because in Little Rock you had those. There was no drift coming in, and there really wasn't any other stations. But radio on the AM dial, it was still really strong as far as like, and it still is, of course. But who has an AM radio hanging around, But yeah, I was always fascinated with that type of stuff. As far as like that white noise in the early morning hours or late night, or however you wanted to look at it. But again, thinking about some of those things and those transitions I've had the opportunity to live through, I don't know, it's just really been a cool experience, this thing we call life. And then seeing what is now, and I think this is where I get I drown in the noise, because I enjoy seeing what all is out there as far as platform delivery method stuff. As far as the stuff itself, because like when I was a kid, I don't know about you, but with me, my dad was a set it and forget it guy before there was a set it and forget it thing, right? We watched ABC, Channel 7, KATV, and that was it. It just stayed on Channel 7. The other two, NBC and CBS, KARK and KTHV respectively, they didn't exist. They didn't matter, because we're not changing the channel. That's just not going to happen. I don't know, it's funny how that was, and then of course as the years progressed and we had the cable television and all that, everything still fell back to those three. For the most part, Ed was not a channel surfer ever, and I find myself that way now. It's like I like YouTube. I'm good, right? Plus there's a bazillion things out there, and it curates things that do capture my interest. Losing a little bit of that now, because I'm getting bored with what the algorithm is feeding, because it just is. Which I'll get back to that, where the algorithm got shifted on me yesterday, because Caitlin is tied into, or on her television is still the same YouTube account, so I can kind of keep up with what she's watching, because the algorithm will start feeding it just in general, right? But it's an interesting time when it comes to all that, and then trying to find place in it, if you will, the agency of all of this stuff. Because again, it's like that. I regrounded myself this morning on why I encourage this 3-pillar mindset of things, because it's easy to go far and wide on stuff. For me, go very far and wide if I'm not careful, and that's why I anchor everything around those 3 pillars: the book, the project, the service. That way, if I'm doing something, or if I start getting too far adrift on anything in general, just life in general, I can anchor back to those 3 points with either Toys or Totems, the virtual stump, or the evergreen content package thing, right? Then it reins me back in. But because like yesterday with the algorithm, it was funny because her boyfriend Aiden, he was here, and they got into binging like, and I don't know where this came from because they're both like pretty chill in most things, but they were like, apparently they've been binging some like MMA stuff and some boxing stuff, which was cool because I guess with my algorithm influence plus that just getting shot in there, I had a lot of things show up from like the 70s with Muhammad Ali and George Foreman, and I didn't know because it was really before my time when it came to like the Ali Foreman feud that was going on. When Big George came back, and he did the 5-man challenge, which is great spectacle, great spectacle, to where he challenged 5 different fighters for one long, drawn out round. I guess you'd call it fight by fight by fight by fight by fight in a row, and I don't know. It's funny looking back on that. That was Big George Foreman. That's when he still had the fro and the really bad attitude before he became Smiling George, with no hair and much more calm. It's funny. We all change. But it was cool kind of getting that taste and feel and vibe of what was the 1970s and entertainment and all that. But that also opened the door to some other suggestions that were really cool that I've got absorbed into. One being Slade, if you're familiar with the band Slade. As a kid growing up, again, my biggest musical things that still stick with me today would be Kiss, Make Up Years, and then Quiet Riot with Mental Health. That was the first album I ever bought. I actually bought an album. Radio was cool with me for everything else. I didn't need to collect a bunch of albums or cassettes. So, but Quiet Riot's Come On, Mental Health. That was just the one. Plus, it was the MTV years and all that. And then in that kind of sort of paying attention thing, I'd heard that, like Come On Feel the Noise was a cover of the band Slade from England, and I never really thought much about it. I was like, okay, cool. I didn't want to be one of those snobby types that still to this day get on like, well, that was a cover actually because the original band was, whatever. It's what I was introduced to. However, now at this stage in life, and learning more and more about Slade and their influence, because you got to figure their biggest pop came on the year I was born. So to not be completely associated and understanding what the band was doing and its influence at the time, well, but I think but it's funny because, again, in watching those clips, videos, documentaries from Slade from back then in the 70s, to see how truly they were influential on the influential things for me. And that was like, so my 2 favorite musical influences, not just as a listener, but also as a guitarist, picking up a guitar for that reason, with Ace Frehley, and then just always blown away with Carlos Cavazo of Quiet Riot, and then of course the Randy Rhoads story there. But Slade was just amazing. It's like if you wanted to look at, it's Sunday morning, let's Bible talk. So let's say that the Bible as we know it now there's like that Q version, I think it's how it's referred to. It's like it's that one hub source basic. Everything else is based on what's inside of that particular translation. It's the core, right? And to find out that Slade was the band that influenced the band, and the bands that really influenced me stole a lot of their gimmicks and everything else and sound from Slade. And man, they really were one hell of a band, and very much more innovative and influential than the ones that went on to influence me. Like even with the lead guitarist Dave Ellis, I think that's right. I hope I said that right. Apologies, Dave, if I got that wrong. But anyway, even in his stage gear in '73, what he was wearing is most certainly what Kiss was inspired by for their stage garb, and especially Ace Frehley. There was one particular outfit that Dave wore that looked a whole lot like the spaceman suit by the time, well, before the Love Gun, I guess, and then after. Anyway, but the point is the influence was there, and Naughty, his voice, Kevin Dubrow would really, if you went side by side, it's like Kevin Dubrow is a tribute artist of Naughty of Slade, because that dude's voice is just amazing. Even Ozzy Osbourne in one of the documentaries talking about that, he was that Naughty was the best voice in all of music, and I agree with that. let's see, it was an 80s new wave guy, then Pantera came out, and I'm converted. Well, see, that's me. It's like, I don't like, well, like metal for me, I love the hair metal stuff. I'm unapologetic in that, I always have been. And because there's, you go genre after subgenre after subgenre after, but I like, if I have to go, the best I can describe is like, I like that classic rock arena sound, but that is a little mothball-y sometimes. But when you get into the 80s and the hairband stuff, that's a lot of fun and energy and everything. And then along comes Guns N' Roses with Appetite for Destruction. And that album changed everything because it was just, again, the attitude, the energy, Slash and Duff McKagan, Izzy Stradlin, that full sound, the melodicness of it all, because every single one of those parts and pieces from those guys had so much movement going on from a musical standpoint that you couldn't help but get pulled into it, you know. And then Axl Rose's energy at that time, wow, you know. But again, thinking about Slade, and I just learned about Slade is Flash. Is that no Flame? Slade is Flame. The the little film that they had done back then. It just celebrated its 50th anniversary last year. I haven't seen it, hadn't heard about it, but that was basically Spinal Tap before there was Spinal Tap. So again, to find these historical nuggets, if you will, and see how it influenced everything past it that you didn't know anything about beforehand, I find those things fascinating. Yeah, see. Yeah, see, well, you know, with the hair metal stuff, you know, to poo-poo it, I think it was mainly because it became such a sign of the times because it was so flashy and colorful and perfect for MTV. Because the pop culture music at the time, yeah, I don't know, it was there, but it wasn't profound or impactful the way I saw it. But I'll catch myself, you know, if in the event you hear Duran Duran pop on the radio, you just kind of know it, even if it's whatever, you know. It's like not hating on them. I mean, hey, I know their name, right? I know their songs. Okay, so I can't hate on them in that regard. But it's interesting to think about that. I don't know. But it was fun. But again, like learning more about Slade, watching some of the documentaries, getting their story, the things that they did that are so they're a part of the like Merry Christmas, their Christmas song. I've heard it forever. I didn't know who it was, but I love the song. Everybody loved the song, right? It's Z-Rock. What is Z-Rock? Help me out with that one, Damien. I'm not familiar with Z-Rock exactly by term, but maybe I am. But yeah, it's just interesting the time in which we live and how I this is how I can get overconsumed with stuff if I'm not careful, because I really like to analyze things and bring it in, sometimes just too much. But we learn so much from it. Because again, it always falls back into the whole thing with everything old is new again, and there's nothing new under the sun. A lot of that. And I'll circle back around to where I started on this thing as a producer of stuff, right? Now you're a content creator or whatever. But as a producer of stuff and working on certain things and having to do the physical research, you know, starting off in a library, versus just having the Akashic record at your fingertips now. It was kind of funny. I was playing with Google's Gemini this morning, and I said, okay, you're an expert producer for a podcast. What does that look like? And it's great. I mean, it works. Boom, just like that. But then for me, as an extemporaneous speaker type, I'm like, this is too rigid, even for a guy who likes to follow the clock. But it was just too rigid, and then I had it just source out topics that would be great for a Sunday morning. And I guess so, but definitely does not. The machine doesn't know who I am, really, right? I can make it know who I am. I can feed it stuff, but it doesn't know who I am. So I was making suggestions that I could have extemporaneously went on about, but it just, it was, But that goes back to the question of, well, not really the question, but the observation of what's happening inside of the digital space, that I find something, because it kind of it follows that other line of thought of just because you can doesn't mean you should. I mean, I can sit here and I could take the robots and type in a prompt, vibe coding, that would say, okay, I want to do something along these lines that targets this particular demographic and this particular audience, and it could map that out perfectly. And there's value in that, but at the same time, it's also like, damn, that's awful robotic. Of course, it needs the human element for it to finally work. But I don't know. It's just interesting because, again, it also goofed because at one point it had, as it was mapping out a perfect topic and a perfect way to present and all of that, it was like going through those steps that it was laying out and said, well, you need these 5 controversial type engaging positions to take. Would you like to see that? I said, sure. And then it generated an image instead of listing 5 bullet points. And I'm like, you missed your own directive you gave yourself. And then I typed that in and called that out. And it said, ah, you caught me once again there, human. So it shows that they're not perfect at all. And because that was its own generation of a prompt, right? It wasn't me typing something, not wording it properly to where it could understand, but it didn't understand what the hell it said itself. So, but that will get better. It just will. We have to accept that reality, that things in that space are going to get better because they do. It's just the way it works. But let's see here. Let's see. Z-Rock was a coast-to-coast AM radio metals. What? From the late 70s till about 90. Yeah. I heard about that. Yeah, see, AM 900 on repeated all across. Yeah, see, I missed that. But again, I grew up in Little Rock, so we had our own of sorts as far as Z-Rock goes, but it was KWAY, the mighty 1090. It too wound up taking the religious route, and it's, I mean, gosh, probably by the mid 80s is when it had made its switch over to the religious programming. But yeah, the mighty 1090, that was a 100,000 watt AM station. That bad boy was a monster. Yeah, see, there you go. And that's the way KWY was. you could go from anywhere. I mean, 100,000 AM watts, you're covering the planet, man, for real. And but then they were low power at night, or they became low power at night. I don't know when that switched, but yeah, massive. And that's the thing too. It's like when you think about the technology that truly reshaped the world in the 20th century, that has not gone away. We just don't use it now, but it's still there. Which is the whole analog radio and television dial. Now, radio didn't get the kiss of death like television did when they did the digital switch from the analog VHF, UHF channels to the digital VHF, UHF channels. So what are they doing with those analogs? Because of course with analog, it's a little bit more, there's a couple more technical hiccups that need to come into the pipeline to make them work for the digital age, but it's still there, right? And radio, again, there was supposed to be a similar mandate there, but it never really came about. So I don't know. I think a few stations have picked up like the whole high definition radio to where you can get sub-channels on their frequency. Always fascinating, man. The math and all of that is like super hoodoo voodoo to me. It's like even in the business trying to play or keep up with how these things work, it hurts my. I don't need to be Marconi, Tesla, Edison. Nope, screw it. I'd rather put what rides the waves versus figuring out how to do the waves. But that could be detrimental if the grid ever came down and you had to go back to that, because I'd be kind of screwed because I wouldn't know how to build that transmitter. But who does, right? I don't know, but it's just fascinating. I think, again, when you think about like one of the things we were talking about last night, it was myself and Alicia and Caitlin and Aiden, and we ran out to do something. I don't even know what it was. But thinking about, they were born in 2009, right? So now they're 16. But in 2009, when they were born, you got to figure, by the time both of them came onto the planet, we had already seen Patrick Swayze was gone, died that year. Michael Jackson, same thing. So while they've never lived in a world without Patrick Swayze or Michael Jackson, the influence of those two people still remains, thanks to the recorded content that's archived everywhere, right? Can you imagine what that would have been like? Because we had, okay, you figure I was born in 73, so by 73, that was the same year that Alan Watts died. And I'm just now becoming familiar with Alan Watts's body of work. Wow, right? The Beatles had already broken up. No longer a thing. And so, but the Beatles are still, and still are, relevant in pop culture conversation. And even now, like the animated series, though, it's amazing to me how many people are not familiar with that. But I remember that as a kid, because at one point, I think it was ABC, had picked it up, and it was on Saturday mornings, like really early for a while. And then I think the UHF station, KLRT, they had picked it up for a while, so I became familiar with it. Because again, that brand would never go away, just like the Monkees, right? So many things that were ingrained in us, Gen X, that had come before, long before we ever came on the planet, was still accessible thanks to the recording mediums that came up in the early 20th century. It's fascinating to think about. Because imagine what all was lost that was not able to be recorded. Imagine the music that was created for thousands of years that we'll never know what it sounded like, or even know what it was, because not everybody was able to publish or write on even cave walls. I don't know. I think it's fascinating. But it's interesting because it shows, for me, the way the human experience has evolved so much in a really short amount of time. Because if you take the last 125 years, we just kick off at 1900, the start of the 20th century, to where we are now 26 years into the 21st century. Wow. And again, the AI systems, quite frankly, they're interesting to me in that they can do a lot of, we'll call it tool work, really uber super fast, super fast. And I can appreciate that. But humans can't maximize its efficiency in that, because we think faster, and we have the ability to retain as much. But I don't know. It's such an interesting paradigm that we're not waiting on, but we're straight up in. And many things are starting to land now. It's like, okay, this is going to be like this. And from creating entertainment, that particular thing, you've got to be pretty much, in my opinion, you have to be of a mindset that you're doing it just because you want to. You want that creative expression, or you need that creative expression. Audience be damned. That's like this podcast. This is not a podcast where I'm looking to go viral and become a Joe Rogan. Because even in that sphere, if Joe Rogan didn't start when he did 10 years ago or whatever it was, he would not be where he is today. Because starting something new now can be done, but just the dynamics of growth are different. And that's why, when it comes to producing any type of content, I stack it and I offer it as a service as, again, it is about stacking and consistency, because that's kind of like the key to the best shot you got at getting eyeballs on what you do. The early terms of philosophies, strategies of posting every day, that's great. And it worked pretty well. And it's still, again, human beings, we still love consistency. Hence why I program myself to be here every morning at 8 o'clock. It's not a good time to do this, because most people are either still sleeping in or on their way to work or getting ready for work, right? So there's not a whole lot of, there's no forced listenership anymore. And that's a thing now. And Damien, I like your point here with, you said a bunch of TV shows on tape and everything. And what's funny is I was the worst hoarder in the world when it came to so much stuff like that for years and years, to where it's like I didn't want it lost. Because again, as a kid, when something aired, after that it was gone. Because again, I came around in that transition period before beta or VHS was a thing. So the ability, like, remember the first time you could buy your favorite movie on VHS? Whoa. And it's so funny because that turned into a habit for me. Seriously, it's like when Star Wars, because Star Wars was so profound for me personally. I mean, I was super fan of it. Like anybody who knew me before the Disney Star Wars takeover thing, I was diehard, man. I absolutely the everything about Star Wars. I just loved it, right? And my buddy Sammy, if you're local and you know Sammy Estrella, awesome kid, love him to death. I say kid, he's like 40 something now, but anyway, he was a kid when I met him, damn it. But anyway, so he still sends me Star Wars stuff, and it's great. And the original stuff still matters to me. It's like it still clicks and hits, but it's not exactly the same. But I remember every time that a new VHS version would come out, I'd have to snatch it up because I never wanted to lose it again. That fear of missing out or it being taken away again. And it's just funny. But now it's like everything is available streaming. There for a while, for a good while, in the 21st century, if I happen to be out and about somewhere at a flea market or a thrift store or a yard sale, and I would see a VHS copy of any of the original trilogy films, in special editions too, I'd snatch that bad boy up. And then one day I had to look and say, why in the hell do I have all of these? It's like, well, each one is slightly different or dramatically different. Da, da, da. And I just realized, okay, that's just silly. Stop. And so I did. But I am still, but now it's actually kind of bled into other media copies. You know, it's like if I see it on DVD or Blu-ray, it's like, I have to fight the urge, but it's only a quarter. I know, but I don't. Yeah, it's just funny. It really is the way we. Again, and I cover it in Toys or Totems, but because again, it's like we could trap ourselves, and that's someone else's dream type thing, and that compulsive buying and collecting. But I don't know. But it's a fascinating thing in time, because again, it's like with those old cartoons and things like that. It was something. I say Bugs Bunny before the neutering. Yeah, and you know, it's so funny because those Bugs Bunny cartoons when we were growing up were already 30 years old. Think about that. Hence why the stars of the time were being animated into those tunes. Hell, a lot of them were already dead, you know. But we know who Peter Lorre is thanks to Bugs Bunny. Yes, and that influence has remained ever since. Clark Gable. Trying to think of some of the other ones that come to mind that were all in there. Betty Davis. Because there was that one, if you recall, and I know you will, because we all did, but the one where it was the Looney Tunes and everybody wasn't there. I think Bugs was there. But all the stars of the day. I can't remember the name of the cartoon itself, the title. But then again, we didn't care about titles on cartoon. I didn't care about titles on cartoon. I just know there was another cartoon on, so that was awesome. And Disney had elevated itself above Warner Brothers cartoons because of its scarcity. Because you remember when Disney stuff was very unique and rare, where you'd see Bugs Bunny every Saturday morning. The Disney stuff was special because that would only happen either a seasonal thing, like a Disney Halloween, which is still like the most magical thing ever, period. And I don't care which iteration it is up through the 80s. Then when we got to the 90s, it started getting too 90s feeling, so it just didn't hit the same. But like Donald Duck and Mickey Mouse and those troop of characters, they were more special. It was a higher grade animation too, because they did less just in between fake it till you make it stuff. Hollywood Nightclub one. There you go, Damien. You are quite the historian in remembering that. But yeah, those tunes and those characters that were embedded there, again, like 30, 40 years before we were even alive, were still so relevant to our influence in childhood. Fascinating, isn't it? But now there's just so much that it's next to impossible to keep up with things. Because and even in just the 20th century here, when we saw like the real explosion of Nickelodeon programming with SpongeBob or Ren and Stimpy or Dora the Explorer, or any of those things, they still have some cultural relevance because they were born in the transition period, so there were still kids to gravitate and parents who were doing stuff with their kids with that stuff. So that transitional stuff was there. But nowadays, I just don't see how it's even possible. DuckTales. Yeah, woohoo! I actually watched something on that just the other day. I think it was like a Professor of Rock video. He was like pulling out like the top 30 cartoon theme songs. See, and that's, I don't even know if that's a thing now because like those cartoon theme songs are so powerful and important in programming us to enjoy these properties to the end of time, or at least the end of our time. But it's interesting. But that's why like I've gotten so fascinated with meme culture, as they call it, because of the things. Now, I will say, and I'd seen it on the Walmart shelves first with the skibbity toilet thing. I'm like, what the hell is this? Because the design work on the characters, where you had the guy with the security camera head, or the female character with the television head, and I'm like, well, that's interesting to look at. You know, it's like it was an interesting design. Not overly captivating, but at the same time, it caught my attention. I'm like, what the hell? And then the head out of the toilet thing, I'm like, what the hell is going on here? And this is all in the toy aisles, right? I'm like, what in the hell is this? So when I finally, thanks to clearance pricing, because there'd be no way I'd ever buy anything like that, this full like $20 retail that's insane. But I'd found some for like $5. And I was like, I have to explore this. I like doing that. I like finding things, or I get introduced to things. And when you've got a merchandise property that kind of like, I don't know, it's like note taking in a way, retail note taking. But I picked them up, and so I brought them home, and then I finally decided to dive in. I like that physical thing, gave me enough justification of my time to research it. And I started looking, and that's the worst brain rot nonsense I've ever seen in my entire life. I mean, it's like for everything that was kind of interesting about the designs, it went totally out the window because of the story that was built in, or whatever. No story. I don't know what the hell it is. I gave it the best shot possible to figure out, what is this? Why is this? Why is it strong enough to get a licensing deal to show up in the Walmarts all across the country? And it's truly the dumbest damn thing I have ever seen. And I just found it interesting. It was crap. But then I come across something like this 3D model that I can print of Tung Tung Sahur, and just its look itself made me go, what in the hell is that? And again, this loses the wood texture, so it just kind of looks like, you know, poop with a stick. But I look at that, and but it caught my attention. I'm like, well, that's kind of interesting. Then when I dug into it to see what it was, I'm like, well, that really is kind of interesting. It was entertaining. The music was pretty much just house stuff, which is what it is, right? But the electro pop, or whatever they call it, or Euro pop, I don't know, whichever way that goes. But it was still interesting enough to go, huh? And so, and I can appreciate that. It's like, I got to give a shout out with the Fuggler back there, Super Fuggler, because again, I got that as a Christmas gift from Caitlin's boyfriend Aiden, and I've seen them, but until I actually looked at it and had it out of the box and I was looking at it, and the thing hypnotized me. I swear to you, because again, it's little weird face and eyeballs and those real teeth. It is just such a weird amalgamation of a thing, you know. But it's interesting, and it doesn't have a whole lot of story going on with it, but there's a little bit, I guess, since it's, you know, Supermaned up. I'm glad to see Fugglers like Superman. I can appreciate that. But I don't know, but it's still, it sparked something. And then the Labubus, because again, I know what a Labubu was, but again, it was one of those things that I came to know by way of 3D printing, because when you go to a place like Maker World online and you see what people are creating, and you're like, well, that's interesting. And it's like, is that original? Because it looks original. I've never seen anything like it. Only to find out it was inspired by something else, not the actual creator who created that property, or what became a property. But anyway, but to know that it inspired people enough to like make a 3D model, they drew a picture, right? It'd be no different than us drawing a picture of something we saw on television or on a movie. And but they're doing it in 3D rendering, so you can then turn it into a physical object. What a time to be alive. Yeah, South Park, that's another great one. You know, it's like, and it's so funny, the absurdity of the simplicity of the art style and animation that Trey Parker and Matt Stone put together that built the juggernaut that it became, and the lasting, my gosh, everything of it. But again, but that goes to show story is very, very much important, because those episodes are very smart. Regardless of the asinine animation, that you would hold a standard to, but they reestablished, they owned something. They created something and owned it in a way that shouldn't have worked, but it did because the stories were great, and they still are. But anyway, thinking again to the things that are out there now that truly capture my attention and imagination, and Labubu. The biggest thing about Labubu is the psychology in the design to create something that looks like it should have already existed. And it does. It looks so damn familiar, like it's been around for decades. But it hasn't. But it's got just enough of the elements to make you think, I've seen that before. And you're pulling up memories to find where you saw this before. And there are just enough elements, familiar elements in there, like where the wild things are, or the Manchi cheese, or some other thing. But of course, this is a 3D print, so it's a solid piece of plastic, or hollow actually, but versus the actual Labubus that are plush with the vinyl pieces, right? Doesn't matter. The impact is still the same. You know, it's just brilliant design, very smart. Speaking of Trey Parker and Matt Stone, because they were truly a breath of fresh air. I remember the first time I saw South Park, I was doing my stint in Joplin, Missouri at the time, and I drove back to Little Rock to go see my parents for Thanksgiving. And so anyway, so I'm back in Little Rock, go over there, and I was doing a little channel surfing. Dad wasn't happy about it, but I was channel surfing on the cable, and then this little cartoon caught my attention. And it was like that first episode where Cartman got abducted, right? And I'm kind of watching. I'm like, what the hell is this? Because we didn't. I mean, the closest we had to that, as far as like more of an adult demoing cartoon, was Ren and Stimpy, right? That's my take anyway. What the hell was that? I don't know. Anyway, but we as I get pulled into it and I'm watching it, and then all that is that episode, I'm like, this is the most funny, brilliant thing I think I've ever seen. And so that caused me to dial in the way I dial into things, and go deep diving on them and just seeing who Trey Parker and Matt Stone were. And then I just followed them religiously for the longest time because with South Park and then learning about Cannibal the Musical. And I'm sure you've seen Cannibal the Musical by now if you're a South Park, Trey Parker, Matt Stone fan. But that was just great. It's funny. It's like it was built to be a B movie. The production value, I think, is great. I do. And the musical numbers are spot on and fantastic. Yeah, color forms brought to life. That's a good way to put it. With a little bit of the little people from Play School, right? But anyway, but seeing what they've done, and again, and what they've done from a business standpoint is absolutely brilliant. And this is like when it comes to like toy collecting and my toy obsession things, that quickly evolved from a nostalgic thing and connecting with like a Superman character into what is the business model that's happened here. Because I never lived in a world without Superman. My dad never lived in a world without Superman, and my grandfather was there when he came about. So when you think about that type of generational legacy of a character, there's something to it, right? And I can say that about everything that I have some type of representation of around me. But I look at it from that angle. It's like that advertising, marketing, promotional angle when it comes to branding and creation, you know. So it had that big impact. But what was really cool when I decided I wanted to like really explore the possibility of doing film, which the film that inspired me that I wanted to make a movie was hands down Kevin Smith's Clerks. That was the one that I'm like, I can do that. And he says that all the time. It's like people see it and they're like, well, hell, I can do that. I mean, that crappy little black and white film. But again, it was story that made that work, because the black and white at the time would definitely made it unique because there were no black and white films. And it was grainy and it was gritty, and the dialogue, that was the key. Story and dialogue, because I could so relate to all those characters because I knew those people. So Kevin Smith did a great job of capturing the Generation X stereotypes that we all are, right? And boy, that grabbed me. And that's when I really got serious about, okay, I want to do this. Because I'd been in radio for quite a long time at that point. I loved producing audio stuffs, audio plays. that were totally passe, but I could transfer that into doing commercials. And so I did. And then, of course, bits on air when I was still like really doing the radio thing. So it was like a natural progression in the film aspect. I never wanted to do television. I still didn't want to do television. Had no desire to do television. And if you watch any of my television stuff, you're going to see, and it doesn't take much. You don't have to be very in depth to figure out my production style. But my television creations really were, for the very longest time, radio with pictures. It just was, because visually, I can think visually, but the thing is, the audio comes first. To me, it's that theater of the mind thing. So when I create, I'm creating theater of the mind thinking. It's sort of like when people talk about the book was better than the movie, because when you read the book, you cast the scene, you cast the characters, you built the scenes. You know what it looks like, even though the author spelled it out, but you built that in your head, which gives it so much more depth, and no one can recreate that because no one's going to do like you would do, right? So anyway, that's funny, because it's like I think so auditorially, visually, or visually auditorially. I don't know, one of the two, but I can build the soundscape first, and then trying to get that to match visually has always been a chore, because it's like I can paint that audio picture, and I love doing it that way, right? And back in those days when it came to voices, you either got your gaggle of your troupe, or you just started doing them yourself, you know. You did it. But then to be able to translate that into a visual, the visual couldn't match the audio for me, right? In my creations, I couldn't, because I could go so much bigger with audio than I ever could with video. Well, that's changed now so much. And that's where, like, when it comes to like AI image generation and video generation, I see that there is opportunity as a tool for that to be able to tell some stories in a way that's never been able to be done before for the different type of creators out there. And this is why I can't hate on it. Now, I don't care for people who are trying to really business. It's going to be a business model for sure, no doubt, just like any other thing. But it's like, it does glut the system, but it is what it is. But don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, is my take on encouraging learning AI systems and tools, because they're not going to go away, and it's just is what it is in that. But at the same time, it is going to be weaponized. And I'm going to say something that sounds terribly racist, but it's just true. Just like cell phones and social media and bot farms. Because again, if the dead internet theory is true, the majority of things you're interacting with on any of the socials is a robot. Excuse me. It is what it is in that, and that's not going to change anytime soon. And just get more and more. But the true creator, like, again, you could give me a paintbrush and I could never be a Da Vinci, or give me a block of stone, I could never be a Michelangelo. But I can see him in my head, and I could make an audio soundtrack for it. Any of those things, and do it better than them, because those tools work for me better than theirs, right? So I don't know, that's just kind of where I'm going. But anyway, thinking about Trey Parker and Matt Stone and that influence and that impact, and thankfully we have everything recorded and archived where it's like 1,000,000 miles deep. But when I got into doing the film thing, and I remember coming back to the USA Network stuff, it was like USA Network was awesome, because that was like the first cable channel that mattered. Everybody was talking about like HBO, because you could watch movies, and then you had the booby movies on Cinemax. That was all great. Porky's, right? You know, if you know, you were there. But anyway, but then mainly the Kaufman films, Lloyd Kaufman, and all of those incredibly terrible movies like The Toxic Avenger, and the Roger Corman type stuff. But Lloyd Kaufman was even more dynamic and genius to me, because he was so bold in putting out some of the dumbest visuals one could ever see. You know, like using a watermelon with a wig to take care of that kill shot hit that they needed, you know, or reusing a clip over and over and over. Oh, do it backwards. Okay, fine, cool, that'll work. You know, and it just that's filmmaking. That's like Edward D. Wood Jr., but worse. You know, it's like Ed Wood was the start of being the world's worst director and get that label. But Lloyd Kaufman, I got to tell you, I think he earns that more. But in going into the realm of wanting to learn film and do film, it's like the opportunities in Arkansas, sorry, they sucked at the time. There were none. I sat in, oh no, excuse me, I sat in a journalism class and realized that was a waste of my time at UALR. And then I pretty much got the same impression from film stuffs that were available. I was like, that's a waste of time. And I didn't care to move across the country to go to a school. I was like, no, that's a waste of time and money. I just wasn't interested in that. But I knew there were books, and books are awesome because you can learn stuff from them. You still can. But anyway, I caught wind of Lloyd Kaufman's Make Your Own Damn Movie. Right, and this one's forever on my shelf. I think, gosh, I may have picked this copy up. Well, this is anyway. I originally got the copy back in '99. What year was this thing published? No, that's not right. I'm wrong. 2003, huh? Yeah, I guess that'd be right. Well, it's obviously right. It's right here. But yeah, so 2003 is when I got a copy of it, when it first came out. But what was cool, though, is the foreword was by Trey Parker. And it's so powerful. And what he says there, and that I want to like share this one with you and anybody who's watching this, that one of the first biggest lessons of making films that Trey Parker learned was from Lloyd Kaufman when I think it was Cannibal the Musical, maybe. Yeah, I think it was Cannibal the Musical. That anyway, Troma Films wanted to do a distribution deal with them, and they met up at a Del Taco in California. I think it was. It doesn't matter. They were at a Del Taco when they met up with Lloyd Kaufman. So, and that's like the cheap Taco Bell, right? Or on par with. Anyway, in that, and they talked about the deal and everything, and everybody was excited because Trey Parker messed on. They thought, hey man, we're finally going to make it. Here we go. And they said, well, how much money is in it for us? And Lloyd said, nothing. And he just kept munching on his taco. And they said to him, what? And he's like, well, you know, it's going to cost this, 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 and this to distribute this film. And they're like, well, damn, then why? He's like, didn't you want people to see it? That has hit home forever for me because, again, in being that's the thing. It's like when it comes to like writing toys for totems, would I love to be a New York Times bestseller with that book? Sure, hell, who wouldn't? But do I have those delusions of grandeur? No, I don't. But the message in the book, I think, is strong, and that's why I promote the book. And if somebody wants to drop a couple bucks on it, I'll be more than glad to let them. But at the same time, it's mainly just to not let the business side of things corrupt the creative side of things, and create for the sake of creating. But there's a line there where you got to figure out, okay, at what point do you got to make a living, and what do you want to do to make a living with, right? And so I built a 3-pillar system to where I've got a product, which is the book, it can be my currency, and then a project so I can feel like I'm doing something good for my community and my country and the world maybe, with a virtual stump, and then the service that I can provide for businesses or candidates, okay, and anybody on the planet really, to be able to build out a content stack of stuff that can get them as engaged as one can hope for when it comes to taking video and the written word and visuals and stacking them up all nice and neat and showing them how to schedule things so they have that regular content going out well on autopilot because the tools and tech allow for it without breaking the bank. You know, it's like I'm not building a value product. I didn't build a value product at its core. I built a time value product because if I can sit you down for 6 hours and you're only involved in one of that, and I can take that hour of you and me one-on-one interview time and then use that to be able to create 15 core messages that can then be dispersed out and wide on autopilot, you actually wind up with like up to like 5 weeks worth of regular content from that 1 hour that you spent with me, right? Now, the other 5 hours of things is me putting all of it together. But again, that's where life has been very good to me and being able to build out systems before there were systems, because it's something I've always been able to do. However, that would take me a lot more time back then, right? Before what we have to work with now, because now I can use some of the AI tools to allow me, okay, think about it like this. If anything that this AI revolution has done for me that I see as for me personally in my workflow is transcribing Oh my God, the biggest time saver in the history of ever, and cost saver. Because I can transcribe, excuse me, I can have the robot transcribe a video, an hour long video. Okay. I can have the robot translate it for me in less than, I mean, I'm being very, 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 I'm being very conservative when I say it only takes 10 minutes for the robot to transcribe the audio from a video, to where if I had to do it myself, it would take me a day to listen and type, stop, listen, type. I mean, it would take damn near, it would be the better part of a working day, because even if you got it done in just a few hours, your brain is so tapped, you're not going to do anything else. But that robot could knock it some bitch out like that. I am all about it. But then also now, back then, and this was another racket back in the day. It's like for like closed captioning for television subtitles, right? See, there was only really one provider of that service. You would have to, again, extract your audio or send in the video of the program to one company that pretty much did it, because nobody else wanted to deal with it, I guess. But anyway, they had a system, they were good, but it still was a 24 to 48 hour turnaround on getting those files. And then when it came to, so like, okay, here's another little story for you that was such a pain in the ass back then. It was like, okay, I'd produce like one of those pay-to-play type shows, right? One was a music program. And I produced this show, but before it could go out, even in independent syndication where you're buying time on television stations around the country or whatever, well, before you could do that, all right, we had to meet all the standards, which is fine, you know, as far as your resolution, all that stuff, like 5 seconds on the front end, 5 seconds on the back end. They had to be clean so they could put up whatever they needed to put in for their legal reasons. But it also had to be subtitled, because that was the requirement from the FCC. Well, that created that one industry that, if you, just like having car insurance, you have to have the car insurance, bare minimum, even if you never had a wreck or you only go 5 miles a week or whatever, but you still have to pay the full premium for it. Okay, well, it's that same type of thing. You would have to take your creation, whether it's the video or just the audio track only, submit it to this country, Rev, I think is who it was. Rev Demo, I think was the name of it. Anyway, but then you would have to submit it to them, and it'd cost you $50 for them to transcribe it. Okay, that sounds like, oh, that's not so bad. Yeah, okay, well, I got a robot who does it for free. But also, I had to wait 24 to 48 hours. And then I'd have to package all that up to then submit it to the station, to then they make sure it all synced up properly for them. Now, imagine you put together 13 episodes. We'll do the math real fast. 13 times 50, right? All right, you're already out $1,000 just in that transcription fee, let alone the time that you lost in getting the damn things back to you. So, for the tools that exist to be able to transcribe a video, to then take those files and be able to use them if you were going to go to broadcast and start to follow those FCC guidelines and regulations, that just saved you a ridiculous amount of time and money. Oh my God, yeah. So, whew, man, you took me down a rabbit hole there, Jim. Remembering, because again, it's like the tools that are available now that saves that much time and money. Oh my God, that's priceless. It really, really, really is. But it always got me thinking, I was like, how can I do this better? How can I do this faster? How can I do this more affordably? And there wasn't a way until someone else smarter than me, thankfully, came up with it. Because now, therefore, the cheat code, sorta, for the longest time, once YouTube came around, is you could get the audio transcript after you uploaded something to YouTube, but it was messy and clunky, and you would have to go through and edit, fix, and everything else to make. But you still couldn't use that as the file to submit for broadcast stations, because it had to be encoded in a certain way. Sort of like, boy, this is going all over the place, but it's just true. It's just like when it came to like ingesting commercials inside of the software systems that were used in television and automation. Like, for instance, and this came to me once I got involved, well, when TKO8 Television got involved with MeTV, and MeTV, the way they went about it, they would basically send you station in a box, right? To where as you receive the satellite signal that would then be fed back out through your transmitter, well, there were other hoops that it went through and processes. And there were certain things you had to do, you know, as far as encoding the AAC code, I think it was. Again, that was an extra step. That was more software that had to be purchased. It was the only way you could create, this is why I had a problem and still have a problem with Apple products, to where if you're using Apple stuff, you have to use Apple products. It's better now than it used to be, but it was all proprietary software stuff and proprietary codecs. Where like with the other side of the world, with the Google, Android, Microsoft stuff, it was universal. It could talk to everything. But the Apple stuff, no, you had to convert that shit, and it sucked. It was such a pain. If you wanted to use anything inside of Apple, you'd have to convert. It was such a waste of time, and I hate proprietary stuff. I hate paywalls for that same reason, and I am not a fan of cloud services because they're all subscription-based, and if something were to happen, you lose all your stuff, or access to your stuff, which is even worse than losing it all. But looking back on all that, again, this is where when it comes to the things that AI does and allows for, and why I can't be anti-AI is because as a tool, it's just proven it's worth time and time again. Because again, if I can take a video, an hour-long video, to then have the robot transcribe in the span of 10 minutes, and I can have it do a couple of different things. It can, one, just do the straight text transcription and separate the interview, which is huge. I mean, it can separate, if I'm interviewing you, and I then take that audio file and I give it to the robot can distinguish who's talking, right? Which is fantastic, because then I can just isolate the interviewee and remove me from the equation, but my context is still there, so it can be repurposed in that manner. But then also, you can have it produce a JSON file, a JSON file, not JSON, JSON, to where you've got your timestamps. I learned that one the hard way, is like, because at first I tried to get it to do the transcribing with time codes, but text doesn't actually do that. It could guess pacing, but the JSON code gives you the exact timestamps, which is awesome when you're going back in to edit, so you're not having to scrub so much looking for that particular thing. Time and money saved unbelievably. So that's why, again, and that all, this conversation all came from looking back at being a producer meant. See how big the whole thing can go? But at the end of the day, it still shows how better we do have it. Even though there are elements in the world that are dark and crappy and stupid and just terrible. You know, it's like we live in a world that doesn't understand there are limits and boundaries that we must follow as a civilized society. Because if we don't, we're not a civilized society, and then there are consequences for that. And consequences on both sides. And then once you realize that sides are bullshit, then you'll free yourself. And that's what I guess is the main thing we do here. We find out that we can have a conversation about things, share ideas, throw stuff out there, memories, and future-proofing things as best we can, but at the same time learning from each other. And this is, and that's actually a great story. I think I'm gonna, like, after this video is done, I'm going to pull the audio, have it transcribe it, and make some really interesting content that I think can benefit people without them having to hang out and have coffee because they're not cool enough to have coffee with us. Cheers. But yeah, that's where it's like I see the true value in AI as a tool. But I'm not, I see the value in automation systems these things can do now with AI agents, but I know they're clunky and they do not work as well as advertised. I can promise you that. They just don't. They will. They will. Yes, that will be a thing. The AI agents that can carry out certain tasks, because if it's on the box, it will not be long before it gets sorted out how to send regular emails and reply to them, right? And to completely automate it and not let you know until there's some kind of real action and traction going on that you, the human, need to be involved in. But all the other mundane shit, no, I can handle it. Let it. Don't waste your time. You got a life to live, right? And that's the whole hope and point, is that finding a tool that makes your life better, problem, reaction, solution, right? And that's just one of those things. And being aware is what's going to keep you from getting run over by this stuff. And I can't stress that enough. I just can't. I cannot stress it enough. Because because it's not slowing down. Corporations and smaller entities will also implement these systems as soon as they can, because it saves them time, it saves them money, and it saves them hassle. Humans are hassles. Let's admit it. We are. But that's what makes us awesome. Because without us being a hassle, they have nothing else to do. So, but be aware, and that's what I'm hoping to do. Again, showing that you're not alone out there. None of us are. We're all still stitched together by a collective consciousness that science cannot fully explain and never will. But we will, because we're just going to live it. and that the tools that are out there are for us and our betterment. And regardless of who pulls the strings, we still are the biggest influence ever for it. Anyway, 9 into 9. God bless America. I went on and on and on. And it's a chilly morning out there, actually below freezing right now, 29 degrees with sunny sky. Sad to break that old habit too. Sunny skies. There's only one sky. Remember that. Oh, let's go. Let's get something done today. It's Sunday. I know I got a lunch date because we have a regular lunch date that we have to do. It's kind of a fun tradition now. So I hope you all enjoy. What was that? I don't care. The other machine over there, aka the phone, decided I needed to do something. I don't, but it got my attention, didn't it? Anyway, have a great one. Damien, I'll see you on the outside world. I promise we're going to have coffee in the real one day. Very soon, hopefully. Once I tear myself away from this damn box.